given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, this is the last video for our leadership video involving the 5 levels of leadership, a book written by John Maxwell. Again, this will be part of the playlist. This will complete up. We already did 1, 2, and 3. We're going to move our ways to levels 4 and 5. Remember, 1 is about that position. But again, obviously, it's not just about the position. You got to move up to level 2, which is about having that permission to lead. Level 3 is working with the people to be productive. Now, level 4 is about reproduction and also ultimately the pinnacle side where you have leaders producing other leaders. And I kind of like to use the word transformational leadership. Got that from Michael Pitaro. But this is basically the reason why I wanted to do this video is I know that a lot of people are leaving corrections because of bad management. So I've created this video to kind of give a perspective, both from what we expect from management, but maybe during the dialogue, what management sees, you know, their perspective. So we're going to have Connie Alleyne on, plus we're also going to have Chris Goede, Go Defense, that's how I remember his name. He's a representative from the John Maxwell group. The reason why I wanted to have them is because, again, John Maxwell developed the 5 levels of leadership. So it was great to find someone from his company to represent the last 2 levels, which are the most important levels, that reproduction of a leader and then having leaders reproduce other leaders. Now, guys, the video is sponsored by 3 people. The first is American Military University. Guys, if you're looking to, you know, get that degree, you know, bring experience back into the classroom, guys, check out American Military University. It's a great online school. They've been supporting us since day 1. We also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And we also have the RAP. Now, we know controlling combative subjects quickly and in an upright position so they can breathe has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, DOC, LA County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the RAP restraint. That's the RAP, W-R-A-P. Go to saferestraintswithans.com for contact information and mention Tier Talk, that's us, to receive instructor training at no cost. Lower liability for your facility and your personnel with the RAP. Give the RAP a call today, 1-800-RAP-911. Guys, there's a video in my description. There's a link. Check out that video. It'll show you exactly what the RAP is. Okay, so let's get our 2 guests. Well, of course, we have a regular, a famous author. Yeah, that's how we introduce her. We all know who this is. And by the way, guys, she has made a promise. Season, whatever season it is, we'll get to that because I haven't been on one show, is going to start being in production. And she's promised me after many years that she's going to give me at least a minute on her show. A whole minute on Connie's show. What's up, Connie?
Oh, my God. I swear I'm never going to be able to live this down. I know I won't. But we've got some great things coming down the pike, and I've made sure that Anthony is on the radar and included in that. So whatever we got going on, he knows he's already in there. Jesus. All right.
Connie, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes, I will. So Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall, which will feature Anthony sooner than later. And I am the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. I come to you guys with almost 2 decades of correctional experience and leadership, and I'm certainly looking forward to having this conversation today.
And guys, you heard her, right? I'll be on her show by 2027. So we're going to hold her to that date. And guys, now here's the pleasure. Me and Connie have definitely been looking forward to this. This was a month in the making. So again, the best way I figure to kind of bring my series to a conclusion is to basically have the people that have developed this idea and have kind of pushed it forward to many different agencies. And what's great is what Connie kind of said prior to the show is we don't usually get theories from other places being applied to corrections. So it's great for people to seek out, find these individuals, and then it's even more of a privilege for them to say, hey, you know what? I want to come on because I believe in what you guys do. So let me introduce Chris Goede. Chris, what's up, man?
What is going on? Let me first say this real quick, okay? I've been on a lot of podcasts in the last several years. I've had more fun listening to the introduction of this podcast with you two than any other podcast. I'm in. Whatever you want to talk about, however long, how many times I'm in.
Oh, and good. We're talking about physics.
Whatever. Listen, I played college football, so I'll make something up. I never went to a class and graduated. Okay, I'll make something up for you. And Connie, like, I want in on the movie. I want on all that. So I'm in too. Put me right behind Anthony if you don't mind.
You'll probably go in front of Anthony.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how that rolls. Hey, Chris, awesome. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Chris Goede. I have the privilege of working with John Maxwell Enterprise. And for those of you that don't know, John is a author that the team has been talking about in the level 1s, level 2, level 3, and the 5 levels of leadership. And I've worked for him on and off for about 23 years. And specifically for the last 9-10 years, it's really been in organizational development. How can we help our leaders become better leaders? How can we help the culture of our organization, no matter the industry, become a better culture for those that want to work in that organization? And so I work with an incredible team, and I said I've been working with John for over 23 years. That means I started when I was 5 years old. Don't anybody go and check my age, okay? But every single day, our team wakes up, and our desire is to add value to people. No matter where they're serving, at what level of the organization, in what industry, we're all in the people business. And so I'm excited to be here and just talk a little bit about that today with you guys.
Yeah, now I know me and Connie are very big fans of John Maxwell's books. I must have read the books I've read, 5 Levels of Leadership, 21 Irrefutable Laws, both editions. I'm working on reading the 2.0 edition of Develop the Leader Within.
Good.
I read the 360 leadership book only because a lot of people believe that the position is what defines you as a leader, and obviously that's not the case. So I felt that when I crossed into middle management, being able to deal with the pressures from above, but then also trying to balance out the concerns from the front line. Connie is also a very avid reader of John Maxwell's books. Would you agree, Connie? Hopefully you agree.
You set her up right there.
We've had many conversations about all of the books. So, yeah, we're all in there.
Hey, listen, sometimes it's okay, Connie, if you said this too, because sometimes I'll go speak and I'll be like, hey, let me see by a show of hands, how many of you have a John Maxwell book? And I say, keep your hands up. And I say, now, how many of you have read that book? Right? And they haven't. Because if you're like me, I have the smartest bookshelf in my office of tons of books that I picked up that I never read. Anthony, I'm just impressed by how many books that you've read. That's awesome.
Well, I think what me and Connie always do is we always exchange books. So if she reads one, I'll read it, and then vice versa. And also what I tend to do is I recommend those books at my job. And I've actually seen growth by giving it to certain people. Actually, one person that's very close to me right now has modeled your 5 levels of leadership. And what she's doing now is she's actually making it up to that next level, which is a very big transition from where she is now. I don't want to get too specific, but a big part of what that is from what she was reading from the little abbreviated version of the 5 levels of leadership. Guys, if you didn't get it, it's definitely a great book. Yeah. Now, before we start, I was wondering if you could just give us a quick summary of those 5 levels from your perspective first. Again, the expert, that works with the company. And then after that, I can kind of tell you what some of the concerns are that we're facing in leadership and corrections that I feel very national. I'm sure Connie will also have some concerns. And then we can figure out how that kind of, what we can do to kind of make the atmosphere better. But I do want people to understand real quick, guys, what I'm trying to get across here is a balanced approach. I don't like generalized animosity. I don't like hate and management for the sake of that they're management. If there's concerns, use those concerns with people. John Maxwell, in one of his books, says people don't lead businesses because of the business. It's usually because of the people. So one of the things I want to get across is the perspective, from management as well as the front line to try to keep things balanced. But Chris, do you mind introducing my audience to the complete 5 levels?
Man, I would love to. I want to start first because you got me thinking about a couple of things, if you don't mind. Man, you are so right. people, they don't quit, they don't quit jobs. They don't quit organizations. They quit leaders. And if you know anything about team member engagement in the workforce, doesn't matter your industry, organization, it doesn't matter. It's a horrible number. I think Gallup, last time I checked, said that 34% of people in organizations say that they are engaged, right? Now, the problem with that is they actually took the assessment themselves and said they were engaged. So the number's probably lower than 34%. That means that we have around 70% of people that are on our team, that are inside our organization, that are not engaged. And here's the key to this whole thing. And this, again, this is not the 5 levels, but you got me thinking about a few things. So I just want to share this with those that are listening, is that I also read a study that said 85% of the people that do say they're engaged, it's because of their direct supervisor. Not anybody above that supervisor, not the head chief, no whatever. It is their direct supervisor is their reason for their engagement level. So if that's the case, then what we need to do is we need to make sure that every single person inside our organization knows how to lead. A lot of people, they've never even been exposed to leadership. They don't know. They've never been taught the simplest things. And they go, oh, I get that. I understand that. But so here's why I think 5 levels is so important. And I love the fact that you guys spent some time on this. We've actually had the opportunity in your industry to spend some time in Illinois, to spend some time in Ohio, and doing some work in North Carolina. And so I understand where you guys are coming from. I've actually had some boots on the ground in different organizations that are helping them with leadership. And I think why it's so important is that we, as the leaders of an organization, the leaders of your team, whatever it might be, you have to develop a common language of how we define leadership. I want you to think about this. If you sat down with your team right now and you said, hey, how do we define leadership around here? And if you had 10 people around the table, you'd probably get 12 different answers because somebody would say 2 different things, right? Mm-hmm. And when you have that definition of leadership being so many different things, they're just going out and leading people how they've been led in the past or how they want to be led. And they're using their own definition of leadership. And until we get everybody speaking the same language, a common language, we won't get everybody believing it. And then we won't see behavioral change. You see, leadership is really about behavioral change. We're going after changing ourselves first. I talk about myself all the time, self-awareness. Matter of fact, let me just give you a little, I promise, Anthony, I'll get to 5 levels in just a minute, but you got me so excited. Here's another thing. Look, the longer we have led and the more complacent we become in the role that we have, the less aware of how we are when we lead people. Here's a question. Here's a question for you. I joke around sometimes with my team. I love to have fun. And I want to say to them, hey, what's it look like to be on the other side of my leadership? And then I'd want to run out of the room because I really don't want to know that answer, right? We don't want to know that answer. But I challenge you to ask that question of those that you have influence with, those that you have the ability and the privilege to lead. What does it look like to be on the other side of my leadership? Okay. Now, some of you are going, man, I don't want to ask that question. And I get it, right? I definitely don't want to come home at night and ask my wife that question. I'll be in big trouble. Okay. But we all have the opportunity to influence and lead people, whether you have direct reports or not. And so we define leadership as influence because we have influence in our community. We have influence in our homes. We have influence in our organization. And so, man, I just want to challenge you to understand that there is a direct correlation to leadership and people and the engagement level of your team, which then ties into turnover and ties into all kinds of stuff. So anyways, let me get back to the question that you asked. And I promise not all answers will be this long, but I just had a few thoughts that I just wanted to share. John says that as we develop this common language of leadership, we got to have a model. I want everybody to lead authentically, and I want you to lead how you were created to lead. Okay. But what I don't want everybody doing is kind of completely straying out and leading outside of certain guardrails that we believe is beneficial for our culture inside our organization. So we got to define that. So we got to set up guardrails. And most people lead people the way they've been led. They don't lead them the way that their people need to be led. Now, you might have to rewind that and go listen to that again to truly understand the depth of it. But so many of us just lead people like we want to be led. And the problem with that is that we're missing probably 80% of our team because they need to be led a little bit differently than we do. They need to be influenced. They need to be connected with a little bit differently. And you may even say, hey, man, listen, I don't like everybody that's on my team. They were given to me. Okay. And I get that. That's fair. Right. But there are ways that you can connect with them as leaders and as people through this 5 levels model. And I think it's so powerful. And I love that you guys are just exposing your audience to this because it's a great tool for them to be able to do that. And listen, I tell this to leaders all the time. You get the teams you get initially. That's fine. But the team that you have over time, that's on you, right? That's on you as a leader. So lots of great stuff there. But let me give you this model from a very high level because you're right, man. This is what we eat and breathe, and this is the foundation to setting all type of culture inside organizations is off of this model. There's all kinds of different types of training and competency training that goes off of each one of these levels, but you got to understand it from a 30,000-foot view to begin to build that common language. So John says that we all have influence, and I want you guys to think about this as a model of influence just as much as a model of leadership. Level 1 is the position level. John says that, man, this level is given to you by the organization, okay? You literally either were given a job, right? Or you were promoted to another opportunity. Either one, the organization thought enough of you to give you that opportunity. When you go into that level 1, you immediately have influence with people because of the position you have. I like to say, when you walk up to someone that's got a name badge on and it says manager, right? Like you may be leading people just by this name that's on your chest at level 1 because you don't have any other influence with them. Now, there are a lot of good things about being in a level 1 leader, okay? But there are a lot of negative things as well. Matter of fact, one of the things that just breaks my heart when I watch organizations around the world is that there are leaders that just all they do is lead from level 1, which is because I said so, command and control, right? And at times you may need to go level 1, but if you don't understand the levels of influence, it's going to be much harder to lead when you need to at level 1 than if you built up the levels of influence. Now, lots I could talk to about that, but we've all gone to work and worked for a leader where, man, we woke up out of bed and we were like, the only reason I'm going to work today is because I need a paycheck at the end of the week, right? I don't like that leader. All he does is boss me around. She bosses me around. That's level 1 position. So what we've got to do is you start there, okay? You don't have to. This is where your brand, your leadership brand begins to take place. What are you learning? What are you developing in yourself? What does that look like? What are you challenging yourself to learn and to understand and to do away some of the bias that you might have? And so what I want to do is then I want to move straight from level 1 to level 2, where I increase my influence with people, to level 2, which we call the permission level. And this is the level where you connect with your people. You build relationships with them. Okay. Now, I mentioned just a minute ago, there's a difference between connecting and building relationships. Adversity connects, projects connect, opinions connect, perspectives connect, questions connect, values connect, all these things that we can inquire upon and look up to and find out about our people allow us to connect with them. Now, listen, when you get to a place of influence that people give you permission to lead them, here's what happens. They give you discretionary effort. They give you everything that they've got, whatever their role might be. Okay. They're not just doing the bare minimum to get by to get their paycheck. Okay. They're thinking about how to make their role a little bit better. They're thinking about ways to make it safer. They're thinking about different tactics and techniques. They're thinking about innovating. They're giving you discretionary effort when they give you permission to lead them because you've earned that. Okay. Now, level 3, the next level, is what we call the production level, right? This is where you have to literally, okay, we can't stay at level 2 just connecting and building relationships with people and sitting there singing Kumbaya, because then none of us would have a job, right? We got to get some things done. right? And I wouldn't be here on the podcast and have been 20 plus years with John if I wasn't able to get things done. And John says you grow your influence with people when they see you contributing and being productive to the organization, not only individually, but also in and through your team. No one, you think about this, I'm a big sports guy, and we've all been in losing locker rooms and we've all been in winning locker rooms. And all I ever hear coming out of losing locker rooms is excuses. Okay. Oh, the ref did this, the ump did this. Hey, right. And we all want to be in that winning locker room. And so as a leader, you want to gain influence with your people inside the organization. Whatever your key performance metrics are for your responsibility, man, figure out how to get them done and do them with excellence. Now, at level 3, the next step, we're going to spend a little bit of time today, is we're going to talk about level 4. This is the reproduction level. This is where you begin to gain influence with people because of what you have done for the individual. I like to say personally and professionally. Now, listen, we all spend time with people inside our organization, probably more than we do with those in our personal lives. So we want to make sure that we're investing in them personally and professionally. I have some people that say, man, Chris, so you're telling me that as a leader, you begin to invest in, train, and develop people that are on your team, and then they leave your team. How do you feel about that? Like you're gonna continue to think about how to make them better, and they might leave. And I say, yeah, absolutely. And then I just kind of get the look where they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And I go, you know what doesn't make sense is the alternative. And then I just sit in a little, I call it pregnancy pause. And they're like, what do you mean? And I go, I don't train, I don't develop them, and they stay on my team, right? So I'm going to figure out how do I go about doing this so that they can be the best they can possibly be. Now, level 5, this is what John calls the pinnacle level. This is where people have led you so well for so long that you look at them and you just say, man, I have the utmost respect for that leader. Matter of fact, let me ask you this question. Those that are listening, if I said, who's the greatest leader that you've ever had the opportunity to serve with, to work for, play for, it's in your family, okay? Everybody begins thinking about a leader that's been in their life. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about that leader, and then I want you to think about everything you've learned on the last podcast 1 through 3, what we're talking about today, 4 and 5, the overview. And I want you to think about the journey you took with that individual. And I promise you, you're going to see each step, each level come to fruition with their leadership with you. Now, before I throw it back to you, Anthony, there's a couple of things I want our listeners to understand. Number 1, you're on different levels with different people all the time. Okay? And as a leader, you need to understand this. Let me give you an example. You may have worked with somebody on your team for a couple of years, and maybe you guys have connected. Maybe you have just done some really good things together. You produced in this team. Maybe you're even developing this individual. They may look at you and say, hey, Chris has level 4 influence with me. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that you're a level 4 leader. That means that you have level influence with that individual. Now you take the same situation. You have somebody that joins your team on Monday and starts, and they don't know you from Adam. They know that you got a title on your chest with a nameplate with a badge that says manager. And that means you have level 1 influence with that individual. So the importance of this is that you've got to lead everybody differently, but it's your responsibility as a leader to begin to progress each individual up through these levels. And so it's time for you to begin thinking about what that looks like in your team. Now, the other thing I want to give you about this model that I think is so important is not only are you on different levels with different people all the time, you don't get to pick the level of influence you have with those individuals. They do. I can't walk up to Connie and be like, hey, my name is Chris. I'm a level 5 leader. Welcome to my team. We're going to kill it. Because she's going to look at me and like, you're an idiot. I just met you the other day. I have no idea who you are. She's like, you have level 1 influence with me. And so I want you to understand that you may have an idea of where you think your influence with them is. But back to that question I asked you earlier, if you were brave enough to ask your people what it looks like to be on the other side of my leadership, here's another question for you. After you were able to explain to them kind of what these influence levels were, if you looked at them and said, hey, be candid with me, tell me the truth, what level of influence do I have with you? I promise you the results, if they're honest with you, might hurt a little bit if they were truly being honest. And it give you an opportunity to look into your relationship with them. So, Anthony, I know it's a little bit longer than you had thought that you needed from me, but man, I'm so passionate about this topic because we're in the people businesses, and it's a great model for people to understand how to begin to effectively influence and connect with each other. You're on mute, big guy.
Muted. One of the things that me and Connie are a big proponent of is when there's good dialogue, you let it run its course. This is my channel, my YouTube channel. If people don't want to invest in good dialogue, then that's their loss. And what you were saying has to be, you have to get it out. Everything you said is exactly what we needed to hear. Connie was actually texting me like, this is great stuff, and I'm in agreement. Before we get to the concerns, because there are some concerns, and I believe in the corrections professions, the concerns comes with a lot of leaders that are stuck at that positional level because they lean on their rank and that level of authority to push for outcomes without really getting their people invested, they're involved, or the people's involvement, and therefore there's no growth. I think people kind of take the position as, I'm here, I made it. And instead not understand that this is still part of the process, that it's not about the destination, but the continued growth, no matter how far up you have gone. But one of the things I want to mention, and maybe Connie could also introduce this thought, is that as we're talking about 4 and 5, before we go to our concerns, we're talking about also the transformation of people to become leaders themselves. I mean, at the end, you would like to sit back and leave that legacy behind, knowing that the people that I left now in charge are leaders themselves. And one of the laws of the irrefutable law, I think it's the first law, is the law of the lid, means that if I'm a manager with a very low level, I can't expect my people to go past that level. Connie, I mean, just real quick, and I want to push this to Chris. I'm actually curious about what he's going to say about this. But when it comes to transformational leadership, do we see that enough with our management and corrections, at least at the higher level? Because my thing is, I haven't worked at every facility, obviously, but just from the response that we get from our audience, from our social media, I feel that we're not transforming people into becoming leaders, giving them that level of responsibility. Instead, we have managers that micromanage and Monday night quarterback. What's your thoughts on that, Connie?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it goes even further back. So, one of the things that I got from Chris as I'm kind of just processing is just the ability to discern who you are. So I think self-reflection is definitely a big one, but discerning where you are as a leader and your position in your staff's life, right? Like, or in their career journey, their professional journeys. And so because in our environment, we're not very big on soft skill development, I think that intangible thing of discernment and being able to develop that as an individual certainly has a significant impact on our ability to lead and to connect and to build relationships, like to gain the permission, which is why I think that so many in our industry are stuck in this positional space, because what do you need in order to gain permission to lead me, right? And that's something that I think I don't know that we can teach that, right? I think that, yes, there's lessons we could learn and insights but we have to be willing to receive those things. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we face, is that we walk around and you've got your badge and, like, I'm the administrator or whoever you are in position, but it's like, okay, so that's your title, but that doesn't make you that to me, right? Like, I'm going to respect your title because that's the nature of our business. That doesn't mean that I've given you permission to lead me or that I'm going to follow you, even if you are leading, right? And I think that's something that we really have to be able to work with our staff. And when we talk about staff development, like that's something that as a leader who is going beyond position, who is going beyond, okay, I got your permission now, right? But like, as I'm working to build that relationship with you, I'm also showing that I'm interested in you as a person. And I don't know that we do a lot of that, like personal, because even as we talked about it, I think in the productivity space, in the reproduction space, I don't know that we do a lot of personal, like, what are your personal goals? Right? Like as a manager, I might think that this person might be a great nursing supervisor, but is that her goal? It might not be. And sometimes, yes, we can identify a potential in a staff person and try to develop them if they want it. But if I've never had a conversation with that person on what their goal is, whether it's personally or professionally, as my leadership in the position, they might go with the flow and like, all right, well, they think I should be a nursing supervisor. I might do it because that's my boss telling me I should do it, right? But that doesn't mean I've earned your permission or even that I've established that type of relationship that you would receive that from me in a positive way. So like, I think as we go down these levels, we're going to see many gaps in our leadership development in the industry. And I'm like excited about this.
Well, you know what, Chris, let me ask you a question, Chris, because Connie definitely hit up on some good points, especially when it comes to that permissional leadership. Like I've had a guy on my show before, Michael Pataro. We did talk about transformational leadership, and this was before I read the 5 levels. So this is a few years back, and basically it was kind of like a jump to level 4 and 5. Basically it just said, this is what we have to do, was an outcome as opposed to the process. Then when I read the 5 levels, I was like, wait, there's a process before you even think about introducing someone to being a leader. There's a connection that you have to have with that person. There has to be a trust between you and that individual. Because again, one thing about permission is you're going from the rights of the position to the responsibility that you have to its people. Do you think that when it comes to working in an agency like corrections, like law enforcement, like the military, where you have that paramilitary structure, do you think leaders may think that permission to lead could be a weakness?
Yeah, absolutely. First, let me go back. I think, Connie, you hit on several really, really strong points there that I want to kind of talk about. But to your point, Anthony, absolutely, right? They Connie used the word soft skills. And the last time I checked, any leader that I've talked to, when I say name the top 3 issues that keep you up at night, for the most part, they are related around people. And when people think about soft skills, they think about easy. And yet all of their problems are based around people. Okay. And leading people is not easy. Leading myself is not easy. Matter of fact, the hardest person to lead is myself, first of all. And so I do think that it comes off as, oh, I can't have this. I got to have this different persona when I come to work because of the structure of the organization than I do outside the work. Let me just tell you this. And if you don't listen to anything else that we're talking about today, and I hope that's not the case. I hope you go back and listen to 1, 2, 3 and listen to this again a couple of times. Authenticity is a trust accelerator. Let me say that again. Authenticity is a trust accelerator. And trust is the currency to all leadership. Okay? Now, I want you to write that down, and I want you to just go think about that for a little bit. And if that's the case, whether, again, it's in our personal life or it's in our professional life, we need to make sure we're being authentic. Because listen, don't act like something that we're not, because listen, your team already knows what you suck at, right? I mean, listen, I'll give you a quick story. I joke around this all the time. Like, I am horrible when it comes to like spreadsheets and Excel spreadsheets and all this stuff, right? Like, but yet I'm leading this team. And this is a couple of years ago. And I would come in to my Monday meeting and I'd be like, here's the numbers and here's our metrics. And they would go, I think that's wrong. And I think that I'll be, oh God, right. So listen, so then I do it a couple, and finally I came one day, I go, that's it. So-and-so's taking over reporting the numbers on Monday. And I got a standing ovation. And they were like, he finally gets it. He completely sucks at spreadsheets. He needs to listen, lead where you're strong, team where you're weak. All right. And be authentic, because it's a trust accelerator. And we're going after the currency of leading people. 85% of what we do is with people involved. Now, okay. So yes, Anthony, I do think that there's this phobia of, hey, how do I connect with my people in order to really be able to lead them correctly? Now, so I do think that we got to overcome that. That's a challenge. That's why I love you're doing this, right, on your YouTube channel. It's phenomenal that you're exposing this. People they just don't know what they don't know, and they've never been taught. They've never had the opportunity to be exposed to stuff like this. So I love it. Now, Connie, you mentioned a couple of things that I just want to unpack for just a minute. And when it comes to this leader that is, hey, I feel like I've arrived. All right. You as people and as leaders and those with influence, you don't even have to have direct report to be doing this. You should be on a continual growth journey personally before you ever think about taking the responsibility on leading anybody. And what I mean by that is simply this: you can't give what you don't have. And I cannot help my team with any type of situation if I'm not growing myself. And by the way, I already told you I love sports. Listen, I think leadership and personal growth is a visual sport. It's contagious. All right. So all of a sudden, I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody comes in and asks hey, Chris, how would you handle this situation? And I'm like, well, I was listening to this podcast the other day. I was listening to this YouTube channel. I was reading this book the other day. And man, I heard this about it. I think this might work in this situation. They'd be like, oh, that is so good. Like, you're brilliant, right? And it's not because it was self-thought. It was because there's so many free resources out there right now for us as leaders to be able to use and to tap into, that we can grow our lid, Anthony, to your point, to begin to expand our awareness of leadership. Now, here's what happens. Let's say I'm just showing up. I'm punching in and day out on the way home instead of listening to Audible and a leadership book or a communication book or whatever book I want. Maybe it's even, I love the fact that you were just talking about, hey, how do we as leaders or people create better intuition, right? There's things that we could be doing to make an awareness of intuition. So there's things out there that we could be listening to. And so instead of all that, let's just say Chris decides to check out. I'm a big sports guy, so I listen to sports talk radio to and from work every day instead of maybe listening to something on a podcast, some of that. That same person comes and asks me, hey, Chris, I got this situation that's going on with work right now. This is that. Like, hey, what do you think I should? And here's what my response would be. I'd be like, well, now listen, I'm in Atlanta, so the reference will be Atlanta. I'll be like, I don't know. The Atlanta Braves are 3 games behind first place, and Freddie Freeman the other day went 0 for 4, and I can't help you, right? Like, I just promise you, you can't give what you don't have. And if you begin pouring in stuff and you begin learning, you'll be able to be able to connect with people and add value to people, right? And I also think there's one other comment I want to make about coming back to what Connie said, which is this. There are ways for us to connect with our people other than just building a relationship. We don't have to be highly relational with them to have level 2 influence. Okay. But man, I promise you this, as leaders, we don't do a good enough job of asking questions. Here's what I understand about leadership that I think is so key. We call it the intent versus perception gap. All right. We judge ourselves by our intent, okay? We judge other people by their actions. It's just human nature. Think about that, okay? It's true, intent versus perception. Now, have we ever thought about taking just a minute and saying, hey, Connie, tell me a little bit from your perspective what this would look like if we implemented this new system or this new process? Or, hey, Anthony, I got this issue over here that I'm dealing with. Man, from your perspective, what does this look like? Okay. Now, when you do that, all of a sudden you're building this connection with that individual. They're going, what? You want to know my perspective on this thing? That's just one. Another way is, man, do you understand their personal values? Okay. We do an incredible exercise with leadership teams and organizations where we go around and we do an exercise where we share our top 5 personal values, not the organizational values. What are the top 5 values for me personally? Because here's what we know about this. If people inside your organization and under your influence know, now hang with me because I'm going to use the word value quite a bit. So you might need to rewind this. Hold on. If they know that as an organization, as a leader, you value what they value personally, they value being a part of your organization to a higher level. What I mean by that is this. How many of us have worked for a leader where they asked us to do something just in passing, or maybe as part of our daily responsibility, that jeopardized one of our personal values? Man, that just disconnected us right away, right? My question for those leaders that are listening right here that Anthony and Connie are connected with is, how many of you are asking people right now on a daily basis to do something that jeopardizes one of their values? And you don't know. And that's okay. You don't know, but it's not okay after today. You got to begin asking questions. You got to begin having conversations. And I promise you, you don't have to build relationships with them in order to get their permission to lead them. There are many other ways to go about doing that.
Yeah, I think one of the things in corrections right now is that we need to have that commonality. I definitely know between departments, we are divided. I don't think a lot of us realize that we are working, rehabilitation, safety, and security. It's supposed to be a function that works together to produce that product, which is someone that can function better in society. But I believe that the way it was introduced, it became an us versus them, and one side trying to survive and the other side trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do here? And, good management, and you'll see this, me and Connie have discussed this in the past, is good management, you can tell by the outcome of how the facility is operating. You can feel it. You can feel it. Yeah, where people are just very involved with each other. And to me, and I'm sure Connie would agree with this, is I've walked into some facilities where there is no communication between the different departments, and the training is isolated. They're training in silos. They're just not working together as one. But then I've walked in some facilities where the communication is phenomenal. Everybody knows everybody. They know each other's function. They understand everything. But the key is, when an emergency situation happens, there's the magic of that communication. Would you agree with that, Connie? And you're muted. I love saying that to her because it gives me like this step up, So let me just say that again. Connie. No, because Chris put me.
I didn't even say you were muted the last time. I gave you a break. I just kind of pointed to your ear. See,
Chris took the reins on that one.
Yeah.
but Connie, Connie adds a lot to my channel because she represents a perspective that for a while I did not have until I grew into the position I'm in now. So being able to see what you're saying and that value coming from us knowing that, guys, we do share a lot in common, but if we're not discussing that, then there's no way there's an effort to bring everybody together. Do you see that right now, Connie?
Yeah, so I do feel that, cultures are changing. Every state has a different culture. Every facility you go into has a different culture because the leadership, the leaders set the tone, right? And so the way we engage with each other, that tone is set from the top down. And so if some leaders feel like the dysfunction that's going on has nothing to do with them, they're probably a bit disconnected from the realities of what's going on in their facilities. But what I would say is that, while I agree, yes, there's a way for us to be more collaborative and build these type of relationships. I don't want us to lose our audience by ignoring the fact that we work in an environment where we are initially taught not to trust, right? And that not to trust isn't like just not trust the inmates. It's also not trusting some of our coworkers at times, right? Like, because we're all responsible for safety and security. And there's a way that we're suspicious of everything, right? We even in the simple thing of like asking more questions, right? I'm just thinking of, oh my goodness, how many staff would receive a manager asking questions like, oh, they're just trying to get in my business. So I want our audience to understand that we're not ignoring the fact that culturally in this environment, yes, there are things that are just inherent in that environment, that distrust is inherent. But I also feel that when you have a great leader in place, that leader is able to actually sort of help you work through that, right? Like you're able to build trust with that leader, even though you may not trust the other elements in the environment. So like, I don't want our audience to think like, oh, we're thinking pie in the sky, because we're not. What we're saying is, yes, there is the ability to build trust. There is ability to build these relationships. And when we're asking, it's not asking out of a formality, but we're asking because we're genuinely interested in what you're interested in. We genuinely want to get to know the people that we're working with. But I do want to recognize that there are some facilities with cultures that the two never cross. Custody and civilians never work together because they have very distinct roles, and we don't want any issues with them getting, all mixed up together. So yes, I do, this is just such a great conversation. As I'm just thinking about it, I'm even struggling with, how do we deal with, those staff members who may be thinking, don't ask me nothing, that's none of your business, right? Or how do we deal with those staff members who might be thinking, I trusted before and look what happened to me, right?
Hey, Chris, before you, because I know you definitely got something to respond, I want to mention something to Connie. The commonality that you're talking about, I think where the main concern is how custody and the civilians view the inmates. Because if custody views the inmates in an us versus them mentality, then those that serve that function to advocate and help, kind of, not their fault, but they looked at as the other side. That's why a big part of good leadership here in corrections is to end the us versus them mentality, between custody and the inmates. So that allows room for the advocates to feel that level of trust. I mean, one of the worst things that was ever said to me in corrections, when I had a social worker come up to me and say, I need custody to protect me, but they see me as an advocate for the inmates. Hey, Chris, I know there's a lot of stuff that Connie said, and I saw you in agreement with, and I know you're very limited on time. So we're going to kind of have you lead the way here. I just had one more thing, but I know you're going to want to comment on what Connie said. And if you don't mind, if I could just borrow you for a few extra minutes. Absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I do want to say something like, man, I think, yes, I appreciate that perspective, Connie, because I think you're right. They're taught to not trust, right? That's the first line of defense. And so it's going to become a learned behavior. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's got to be done with authenticity. It's got to be done not just because we're checking the box to be able to do that. And so I understand it takes time. Now, back to your comment, Anthony, when you were talking about you can feel it. We talked about the culture. Connie brought up the culture. You can feel it when you go into a building, an organization. And so you gave two examples. One that I would say probably spoke a common language, right? They were all speaking the same language, even though they had different roles, they understood the same language. Here's a simple definition that I talk about. One of our executive facilitators mentioned this to me about culture. And he's like, it's simply this: how people think, act, and interact with each other. What is that like inside your team, inside your organization? How do you think? How do you act? How do you interact? And if you really took that and you broke it down, I think that right there will tell you a lot about how healthy the leadership culture is inside the organization. Hey, Chris, I know you got to go. I just have a couple of questions. I guess we'll just bullet your way. Do it. Let's do it. Yeah, because I think this matters. So me and Connie, obviously, we know some of the concerns that are affecting our corrections, our employee morale, whatever it is, in an effort to try to note some of those concerns. I just want to ask you, when it comes to the 5 levels of leadership, so basically just focusing on what we want from a leader, when you have that insecure leader, when you have that leader that doesn't want to grow, that doesn't take their people's issues into account, that really is not that good translator of, orders from above and the concerns from below, what can they do? I mean, I noticed, and me and Connie were discussing this before, you have a lot of good people with great potential that get put under a leader who is shit, for lack of a better word. And then what happens here is the agency, obviously not thinking, because if you have someone with great potential, the last thing you want to do is put them under a leader who just puts a lid on that potential. What can they do? I mean, what can I do if I'm dealing with an insecure leader? What can I do if I'm dealing with a leader that doesn't care about what my input is? And here I am wanting to grow, but in the end, this leader is not allowing me to do that. I mean, that's the frustration right now that's causing a lot of people to leave. Believe it or not, it's really not about the benefits, the incentives. A lot of them knew what they were going into it. Most of them is the fact that I don't feel the leadership today has my back. I mean, what can they do to, try to, get that perspective heard, or, to have better leaders?
If I had the answer to that question, the three of us just could go on the road together and speak for the rest of our lives. We'd be able to solve a lot of problems. I think it's a fantastic question. I think it's a challenge that not only happens in your industry, it happens in corporate America, right? I mean, Connie can speak to this in her experience, and I see it every day in all kinds of different organizations. A couple of thoughts that just come to my mind is, we have the ability as people to influence in all directions. Okay. And we do have the ability to influence our leader. Now, it takes two to tango and everything. I get all that. And even this 5 levels model, let me be very straight with you. You may have some people that are reporting to you that you're unable to move up the levels of leadership because they don't want to play. There has to be some give and take on both sides. Okay. And I would challenge you as an individual, if you feel like you're in that spot, that there are opportunities for you to influence up in different ways. Now, you've got to figure out how to connect to your leader. And maybe you can't, and that's okay. But what it won't stop you from doing, right, is it won't stop you from influencing your peers, influencing those, right, that maybe even work directly for you. And so you got to think about your body of work, because we've all worked for those leaders before, and they're going to come and go. But your journey, your process has you right where you're at for some reason. And what is it that you're learning in there? I like to tell leaders all the time that, especially as they move up for the ranks, I was like, you understand you're getting paid right now for what you did in the past. All the crap you put up with, all the different leaders you've worked for, all the lessons that you've learned, all the failures that you've had and we continue to have, right? We're getting paid now for what we've done in the past. And so a lot of times when you're in those situations, it's like, hey, what can I learn about what's going on right now? Maybe it's even, what are the things that I don't want to do as a leader? And you start making notebooks, I have some coaching friends, and one of the greatest things they ever did was, as they began to serve under different head coaches, they began to journal what they liked and what they didn't like. And they built this playbook for their leadership journey. And now they're leading teams, and they're making sure that they kind of lead it that way. So I think it's also okay for us to be at a place to where we're okay asking questions of our leader, be like, man, hey, tell me why. I mean, you don't go, hey, did you wake up on the wrong side of bed this morning? Like, what's wrong with you? But like, hey, what's going on? What's causing the stress? What's causing? And just they're people like us every day if you're in this position. And so it is a tough situation. I'm not making light of it. It's not easy. It's painful. I've been in situations like that for years. And it just, it's why I got gray hair, maybe a bald spot, right? Like, I mean, we all go through it, but I want people to begin thinking about, you have more influence than you know of. There's creative ways to go about it, and understand that you're there for a reason. And what is it that you need to be learning in that role that's going to pay off for you when your opportunity comes down the road?
The reason why I asked that question is a great book by John is 360 Degrees of Leadership. Yeah. And that really does talk about influencing up and influencing down. And, to hear you say that, I think to add on that, if I may, as a caveat, is that, it's also about time and place. You as a leader, if you're insecure and you take every question that someone provides you or asks you as a challenge to your position, then you yourself are limited in your growth, and you can't obviously ever expect people to grow past, the lid that you place on yourself. I mean, I think that's key.
No doubt.
Connie, I know Chris is limited on time. Connie, do you have any questions you would like to ask Chris before we Chris has to kind of leave?
I would just like to ask, like, how do we translate our intentions in a manner that, because, I'm thinking about this intent versus perception gap. And, it's something that I think, so yeah, intuitively, you've got to be insightful and, do some self-reflection. But, are there like tips on really, I guess, honing in on intent versus perception?
Yeah. So a very simple little exercise that I encourage teams to do is, this is very simple, right? We can get a little more complicated with questions. I think ultimately questions, being curious as a leader, not just going through the makeup of asking questions, but are we really curious why their answer is what their answer is, what their journey is? Are you curious about their journey? Like, I think you got to get there as a leader with my people, right? Like I feel like I know my team and my people fairly well, because outside of our metrics are what we're going after, I'm curious about what's going on and what they're thinking, right? And so I'll give you one quick example of this in just a minute. But I also think this is a very simple exercise that you could do to begin to pull out the perspective of people on your team. I think there are a couple of questions that you could generate around your responsibility as a leader, whatever that might look like. And you guys have played, the game, Would You Rather, right? Where it's like, hey, would you rather broccoli or ice cream? It's broccoli, right? I mean, I'm just kidding, right? It's always got the ice cream. But we call this little exercise we call it this or that, right? And we bring teams in. We say, here's 3 questions around what you're doing, and we're going to give you the question, and we're going to only let you pick one or the other answer. And we give them the answer. For example, let's just say it was around leadership. So maybe I came in and I said, hey, Anthony and Connie, here's the question for today. What's more important to you as a leader? Is it competence or is it commitment? Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go around and we're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to make everybody give me their thoughts and their feedback. And even the quiet ones, maybe Anthony's not a talker, which that's not the case. But if it was, right, I'd be like, hey, Anthony, what do you think about this? Like, he tells me, okay, well, tell me why. Tell me what drove that, right? And all of a sudden, we're beginning to see the perspective and the lens, John calls it the lens principle, behind where their answers are coming from. So you start with simple little questions that you can answer around what your responsibilities are. And then it could even get deeper into where it's one-on-one conversation where we're talking about, hey, tell me, you don't seem like, all right, here's the example for you. So I have a team member, and on her personality assessment, she's a little bit of an introvert, and she's also a little quiet. And so I was like, hey, can I just ask you a question? How can I know that where you're at in regards to the conversation that we're having? Like, do you feel good about it? Do you not feel good about it? And so she simply just said this. She said, look, every time we get done having a conversation about something, if you'll just ask me on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I feel very comfortable with it, 1, I'm not there yet, I need more to talk about it more. Like, literally, if you'll just ask me, I'd love to be able to give you a simple answer, and then we can talk about it. So I literally will have these conversations, and I'll be like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we at on this responsibility, this task, this role? 10. That's good. Okay, out she goes. Sometimes she'll be like a 4. Like, well, let's talk about why are you a 4? What do I need? What do we need to talk about? What are you missing? Right. And it's just the power of those questions that draws that out to understand what lens and what perspective or perception that individual has of their responsibilities. But it goes back to that command and control. We come in and we're like, here we go. You're going to go do this because, see you later. Right? And then when they fail or they don't do it, we're like, well, I don't trust so-and-so. Okay, well, maybe if we would have had a little bit more of a dialogue, of a conversation, of a perspective, of a belief in the front end in them, the results would have been a little bit different. Now, that's a soft skill. And I know in your industry, it's like, whoa, we don't trust first. But you got to begin thinking about this. These are individuals. They're not computers. They're not robots. They're not, automation that we're leading people. And if we want to make sure that we have the most successful organization, whatever that is in your organization, then we've got to make sure that we're going after the people first.
Yeah, I think in our industry, managers seem to forget that we're people. They tend to look at things as has to run automatic, especially because safety and security, but they don't realize, like John Maxwell said, you want people to want to work for you. You want people
That's
to
right.
like working on, start their work week on a Monday, whatever it is, to be happy to go to work because that means they're invested. And at the end of the day, the outcome is something that we're all a part of. And that's what growth is about. And real quick, before we get to the closes, also when it comes to failure, we are going to make mistakes. Mistakes are the best ways to learn. And when you don't allow people to kind of make that mistake, give them the chance to step up and take that level of responsibility, those micromanagers wind up having, employees that don't trust them. Because in the end, you're looking to write me up as opposed to taking this opportunity for me to grow. Time and place for a write-up, I get it. But when you have a good employee that makes one mistake, we shouldn't be treating them on the same level as a bad employee who makes 20 million mistakes. So again, it's a lot to digest, but it's definitely a soft skill that's required in order to have an employee morale that wants to work together to complete the mission. Hey, Chris, do you have anything you would like to say in closing?
Man, I would just challenge every single person that you guys have been able to reach, that are reaching, to continue to grow yourself. And remember this, like, as we have the opportunity to influence people and lead people, okay, we can't lead everybody the same. All right. And listen, you know what? I believe in the golden rule. We treat everybody like we want to be treated. But when it comes to leadership, it's a little bit different. You have to lead them the way they need to be led. And the only way to do that is to really begin to invest, ask questions, understand how they're wired. You see, when it comes to leading people, we look at 3 buckets: how they're wired. So what's their personality test? You may refer to it as a DISC profile or a Myers-Briggs, or maybe the big thing now is Enneagram, right? That tells you a little bit about their personalities. That's the first bucket. Second bucket is, what are their learned behaviors? And what are your learned behaviors? You need to know this about yourself as well. How are you wired? How are they wired? What are your learned behaviors? What are their learned behaviors? Because when a pressure situation happens, you need to understand something. All learned behaviors go out the window and everybody default backs to exactly how they're wired. And we have incredible tools to be able to look at that, to give us a roadmap of how to be able to lead them. And then the third bucket goes back to a little bit of what I talked about earlier, which is, what do they personally value? You want to effectively lead people, not only to connect with them, but to produce and to be productive for the organization, and to be safe, and to whatever, not get written up, all stuff. You want to do all that, then I promise you need to focus on those 3 buckets. And by doing that, you'll have to lead everybody a little bit differently. That's the price of being called a leader. You get paid a little bit extra. You got to put a little extra grind in it. But I promise you, when you have discretionary effort from your team because you took time to connect with them, the sky's the limit for what you guys can achieve as leaders and as a team.
You know what's a great point about that is that being a good leader does require an investment in people. And the higher level, the highest level of the agencies have to realize that. And you have to allow for the managers to make that time. If you overwhelm the managers start messing with the priorities and realize that the priority is always going to be the people. But if you overwhelm them with priorities and different priorities and little things that have to be accomplished to the point where the people that they supervise become an inconvenience, then you need to go back and revisit at the highest level, because it's that culture. The culture has to allow for that investment in the people that are, the front line, the ones that are doing the job, that want to, be noticed. They want to be part of it.
Yeah. How do we think, act, and interact? What does that look like?
It's key. And Connie, you have any thoughts you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed having this dialogue. I think, the gaining insight into our staff's lens is really important. I think when staff can see that we are carving out time out of our schedules to get to know them, I think, it shifts from being a check the box to something that's more authentic. Like, I'm making time to meet with you because you're important and what you want and what you value is important. So I think that as we take this stuff back to facilities and leaders who are watching, it's just knowing that we are in the people business. And I know in corrections, we don't want anything soft. So the thought of soft skills is like, oh my God, it is like saying a bad word, right? But in dealing with the people, like, we've got to recognize that there is a level of effort that we have to make in order to connect with them, in order for them to feel valued and to feel heard in this environment. So, I'm thankful, Chris, for you coming on.
Absolutely.
And this was definitely a great, great conversation for us to have.
Yeah, guys, just in closing, guys, this kind of wraps up the 5 levels. I mean, basically we did have that position, and a lot of corrections, we deal with positional leaders. Basically, I got the position, you have to respect what I do. And that winds up getting a front line that's very disenfranchised. They wind up not trusting that person at that higher level. And it doesn't give that person a chance to move up to that next level, which is, do I have the permission of my people to lead? And then knowing that once you get your people invested, once you bring people together, now you can become productive, right? And then eventually, once people build that trust, then you can have that influence, that influence that creates other leaders, that mentorship. I love mentor and mentees. I love that word because it's an investment that has value both ways. And then the final level is one day be able to sit back, because I'm going through this now, knowing that you created this world in which leaders are producing other leaders. But in the end, the reason why we have this dialogue is because that is a concern right now. People believe in bad management, and that's a big reason why they're leaving. And again, if you don't have a real good internal why, something that really motivates you to stay in this profession, the rough waters of bad management will be enough to say, you know what, I'm out. For those that kind of stay loyal, I get it. There's a greater cause. But for those that, are still trying to figure out where that why is, and trust me, guys, corrections has a lot of things that can really create an impact. I mean, we're not here to impress, guys. We're here to create an impact. Then, I need those managers to kind of step up, understand the perspective of the front line, and be that resource, that tool that believes in the work when it comes together as one. And the biggest thing right now that I want to get, guys, is the divide comes when we're not working together as one. And management is responsible for setting the culture and that environment that allows that to happen. So at any point we're divided, the inmates get that chance to maneuver and kind of play sides. So in the end, guys, management, please, if you're in a position to lead, because again, having that position gives you the opportunity to lead, make it a priority to bring people together, find commonality, find values, find beliefs, and then motivate people to want to be the best. And the only way you can do that is by letting them be invested in the outcome. But the key here, guys, it's also the journey. The journey is where we learn everything. The journey is where the most value comes. So I think Aerosmith says it best. It's the journey, not the destination. And that was in a movie where the guy dies. So obviously appreciate the journey. You know what I mean? But as always, guys, the show is Chance. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.